Good afternoon. It's Skyway at noon, and I am excited to bring you these teachings about the last days, the return of Christ, and specifically, we're studying the Great Tribulation, and it opens with a war where 7 nations are going to come against Israel, and they want to annihilate Israel, and it's called in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38 and 29, the Battle of Gog, G-O-G, and Magog. Now, this Battle of Gog and Magog, it shows up there in Ezekiel, and we're talking about in the book of Revelation, and then we talk about in the end of Revelation. Is this one war, or is this multiple wars with similar or actually the same characters? I'm going to take you there right now, and I'm going to go to the book of 1 John chapter 2. Are you ready? 1 John chapter 2, verse 18. Children, it is the last hour. And just as you heard that Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have appeared. From this we know that it is the last hour. They went out from among us, but they were not really of us. For if they had been of us, they would have remained with us. But they went out, so that it would be shown that they are not of us. What in the world is he talking about? Let's go down just a little bit deeper. Verse 22. Who is the liar but the one who denies that Jesus is the Christ? This is the Antichrist, the one who denies the Father and the Son. Whoever denies the Son does not have the Father. The one who confesses the Son has the Father also. As for you, let that abide in you, which you heard from the beginning. If you heard from the beginning abides in you, you also will abide in the Son and the Father. What is John talking about? Antichrist is coming. Antichrist is already here. Who is the Antichrist? He denies that Jesus is the Son of God. He denies the Father. So this war that's going to take place, it literally is the Antichrist spirit. Everybody say Antichrist spirit. Because the Antichrist spirit has always existed. Are you with me? Now today, I want us to go into our program, and we're going to look at the 4 wars of Gog and Magog. Yes. Is this crazy or what? So the first war that we see in Ezekiel 38 and 39 is this Antichrist spirit enters into a leader that will come from Iran, and they will get 7 nations to join together. As I concluded the program last week, that there are 7 nations right now that are extreme Muslim, anti-Israel sentiments that 50 years ago, they were friends with Israel. 50 years ago, they were friends with the United States. But we have seen things change in a political climate that the fulfillment of the war of Gog and Magog from Ezekiel 38 and 39 is not a stretch. But there would be this coalition of nations that will come against Israel. Now, when this war ends, it ends with many nations signing a pact together, which will cause the Antichrist to emerge. Now, who is the Antichrist? Jesus says, or John says here, the Antichrist is the one who denies Jesus is the Christ. He denies the Father. He denies the Son. He denies that Jesus is God himself. There is this political force that's going to come out that is going to somehow solve this problem. And so there's going to be this pact that's signed. And there's going to be a political leader that's going to lead it, and the Bible calls this person the Antichrist. The Bible calls this person the man of sin. The Bible calls this person the man of lawlessness. Whoever this political leader is will get Israel and other nations to sign a peace treaty. Multiple nations, not 1 or 2. This is not the Oslo Accord. And so if you start looking back in history, when Israel signed peace treaties, different people understanding the prophecies, the way I'm teaching them today, thought maybe those were the prophecies. But this particular war will take place. It will end, and then a treaty with many will be signed, and we will know that we are in the beginning of the 7-year Great Tribulation that the Bible speaks about. beyond the shadow of a doubt. It will be there. 3.5 years. Israel is being forced to disarm. Could you see in our political climate today that Israel, this little tiny nation, defends itself against 7 other nations and annihilates the 7 nations, that the rest of the world would come in and force Israel to disarm? Is there room politically to think that that could actually happen? You don't have to be a believer or an unbeliever, but politically you could say it could really take place. I mean, even we have elected officials in the United States of America who are anti-Israel right now, that have been voted into office in the United States, they're in our Congress, in our Senate. They are anti-Semitic. To think that the world would force Israel to disarm is not a stretch. 3.5 years into the progress of disarmament, another war takes place. This Antichrist figure has rebuilt their armies while they've forced Israel to disarm. And so the Bible breaks it down, the 7 years, the Bible breaks it down into 2 42-month periods of time. So the first 42 months seem to be a time of peace because this war has ended and they've forced Israel to disarm, and it looks like everybody's getting along. But suddenly, the Antichrist emerges. The beast has a false prophet that's going to come up out of the sea. And when the Bible talks about the sea, it's talking about the masses of the people. There's going to be a religious figure that is going to unite with this political figure, and they are going to come against Israel, and they're going to move the headquarters into Jerusalem itself. Again, I opened up the last program with the question, Israel's so small, it seems geographically so insignificant. It's like all the world events don't take place in Arizona, and Arizona is about the same size. Arizona has the same climate, but the Bible never said that the whole world's going to revolve around Arizona, and it doesn't. But the Bible says the whole world's going to revolve around Israel. And guess what? It literally does. It's mind-blowing, isn't it? And so Israel has blossomed, Isaiah 27. Israel has all this food, and it's feeding the nations of the world. Not only are they feeding themselves, they're feeding other nations. Israel has literally blossomed. Israel became a nation. Ezekiel chapter 37. The Bible's being fulfilled right before our eyes. These things are taking place. And 3.5 years into this pact of peace, the pact is broken. The Antichrist takes an army into Jerusalem. And Jesus said to the Jewish people, and he said, when you see the abomination of desolation take place, flee to the mountains. And the Jewish people that have been listening to the 2 prophets, now we don't know who the 2 witnesses are, it's only speculation, but there are 2 witnesses that have been saying for 3.5 years to Israel, don't trust this guy. They've been saying it to the whole world. And there's multitudes that are not going, they've heard these witnesses been preaching the gospel. And Israel's going to flee to the mountain region of Petra. The Jewish people will flee to Petra. The Antichrist will set up the headquarters in Jerusalem itself. And at that time, it appears that the temple will be rebuilt to some degree. And now you know that the contention between the Wailing Wall where the Jews meet and the mosque where the Muslims meet, that there's so much contention there and everything else. Something will happen at this 3.5 year period that will push the Jews out. And now that area that has been contention between the Jews and the Muslims will suddenly have a temple built, an image placed in the temple, and whoever in the entire world does not worship the image of the beast, nor take the mark of the beast to buy and sell, they will be killed. This is going to be clearly known and understood, and there will be thousands and thousands of people around the world who will not take the mark of the beast and will not worship the beast, and they will be martyred for their faith. This is found in the book of Revelation. So now we've seen 2 wars, haven't we? We saw the war that opened it up. We saw the second war where they moved into Jerusalem because Israel had been disarmed. The Jews moved to Petra, and for 3.5 years, everybody on the earth is forced to worship the image of the beast. This is probably, this last 3.5 years is probably whenever you saw all the movies, you read all the books about Left Behind and the late great planet Earth and all these things that terrified Christians to think, oh no, this is going to happen to me and I'm somehow going to slip into this. That 3.5 years is really going to be taking place. But it is a political war wanting to take Jerusalem. It's about Jerusalem. It's about annihilating the Jews. The rest of the world is caught up in something that's called Gog and Magog. And I'm going to get to the conclusion of this in just a moment. Now, at the end of 3.5 years, what's gone on in heaven during that 3.5 years? We've had the Bema Seat judgment, where all the believers have received their rewards. We have the marriage supper of the Lamb. And now we are getting to the point of Revelation chapter 19 where Jesus will return. Because the third war, the question that was asked of me a little bit earlier, and I know I've had a few programs since that question, but is the war of Gog and Magog one war or multiple wars? And the answer, it is multiple wars. The first one, Israel finishes. The second one, Israel's driven out of Jerusalem. Now the third one, Israel is in Petra, and they align their forces to what is known as the Battle of Armageddon. It is in the Valley of Megiddo. It is a geographical place that really does exist. It's not enough they took Jerusalem. They want to kill all the Jews. And I'm going to explain why as I continue this teaching. As they gather their forces for this one, this will conclude the 7-year period because Jesus himself will return on a white horse to deliver Israel from the forces in the Battle of Armageddon. Jesus and the saints who have been with him in heaven will descend from heaven. This is the glorious second coming of Christ, my friends. And everybody on planet Earth will see and witness the return of Christ as he delivers Israel from this third war of Gog and Magog. And that is the victorious return of Jesus Christ. He takes the beast, he takes the false prophet, and he throws them into the pit. And they are put into the lake of fire for 1,000 years, locked up, sealed away for 1,000 years. And Jesus returns and establishes what is known as the millennial reign of Christ, where in Jerusalem, everybody say Jerusalem, he establishes the temple that Ezekiel describes, a future temple that never got built. In the last section of the book of Ezekiel, there's a temple that Ezekiel writes about, and out of it flows the rivers that heal the nations. Can you imagine the healing that needs to happen in the land because of nuclear war and things of that nature? From that throne comes rivers. There's going to be new passageways of water. All these things the Bible spoke about in the future literally could be fulfilled just by looking at current events. Jesus destroys the forces of darkness, puts the beast and the false prophet, locks them away for 1,000 years. That ends the 7-year Great Tribulation, and it begins the millennial reign of Christ on earth, where all the believers and those who lost their life during the Great Tribulation will be resurrected to rule and reign with Christ 1,000 years on the earth. And for 1,000 years, the earth will know peace. For 1,000 years, every nation will have godliness. Every nation will be free of crime, free of sickness, free of disease. The world for 1,000 years will look similar to the Garden of Eden. There we go. Not the Garden of Adam and Eve. I had the wrong word in my head. So thank you for helping me with that. But it will come back to that for 1,000 years. And then in the 1,000 years, the devil himself is released. And now, how many of you are like me? I'm like, why does God want to mess up a good thing? And I'm going to save the answer to that for my last show on the last days. And we're going to talk about what happens at the end of the millennial reign. So with that, we're going to end today's program.